So anyway, James is a local historian. He hosts the Your History, Your Story, the podcast. He's been doing it with his wife, his lovely wife, Kelly, since October of 2020. He has deep family roots in Bloomfield. He's passionate about bringing history to life through compelling storytelling. And I'll turn it over to James.
Thank you very much, Rich. I appreciate that very much. So as I look out, I see there's a lot of people here, and if we are over the allowed capacity, do not tell the fire department. That could be a problem. Anyway, it is an honor to be here at the Bloomfield Historical Society. It is an organization my Aunt Audrey Moore belonged to for quite a while, and I think I spoke here about 20 years ago. But as I'm about to give this talk, I start feeling very nervous because I've got a room full of historians and a room full of firemen and firefighters, I should say, and it's a little intimidating. So, if I make a mistake, please feel free not to say anything. No, all seriousness. Yeah, I live in West Caldwell, but I have deep roots here, as Rich said. All four of my grandparents lived here at one time, and great-grandparents, and my dad went to Bloomfield High School, class of 1937. January 37, he always used to say.
Our father, too.
You're kidding. We'll talk afterward. I love that. I love that. So, before we start to tell this story about the Bloomfield Fire Department, I want to say that our podcast does like telling stories, very compelling stories. So, as we were planning this whole thing, I said, wow, it's 142 years of history and an incredible story. So it's perfect for what we love to do. So what I want to start with is, let's think back to the 19th century before the Bloomfield Fire Department came into being. What do you think were some of, I'm going to open it up to the floor, what were some of the challenges of firefighting in the 19th century? Anybody?
Getting there.
Getting there, a big thing. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Water access, right? You didn't have the water lines available. What would they have to use for water?
Buckets.
Bucket brigades. What do you think we had in Bloomfield available to us at that time?
Third Rivers.
Third River, Second River. Who said Morris Canal? Somebody said the Morris Canal? Perhaps. What else? What else did they lack in the 19th century?
Vehicles.
Vehicles, right? How about phones, communication? If somebody went into a burning home, did they know if they were okay, if they needed help? Do we know where the fire was right away? Okay, so other things that were going on in the 19th century, we had a lot of kerosene lamps, oil lamps, you had gas lines, and sometimes, like I would imagine now, buildings, you know what's in a lot of these industrial buildings. You probably have some idea on the fire department what's in them. And so you may know more about what's in it, but back then you didn't really know. So now we're at the point where we're in Bloomfield, New Jersey. It's in the mid to late 19th century, and some really rough things are going on. If we could just advance that slide. So, there was a place, for an example, where Bloomfield, without a fire department, had a place called the Silver Spring Mill. It was a bamboo paper mill. Bamboo paper was like a coarse material they would use for boxes and things like that. And it was somewhere up where the inclined plane was, which would be roughly where, I guess, Foley Field would be right now in JFK Parkway. And this big place existed. Well, there was a fire there in 1870. One of your members, or one of the people on Facebook, posted an article recently. It was from 1870. And what happened was, it was an awesome building. It was huge. It was multi-storied. It had been there quite a while. And there was a fire. That fire quickly spread, and there were two boilers inside the building. One blew up, and it just blew the side of the mill out. The other one blew out, and it stuck. The shell of it stuck in the side of the Morris Canal. And by the time some people came out in the community to put out the fire, the mill was lost. But there were some other buildings next door that they would kind of protect a little bit. And it was okay in that respect, but the mill was gone. It was worth $100,000. That was the damage to the mill. How much do you think that would be in 2025 dollars? Any guesses?
$5 million.
Well, I thought it might be more, but it was about $2.4 million. 70% was covered by insurance. That's still a big loss back then. And it was, to my knowledge, rebuilt. So in Bloomfield, as time went on, there'd be a lot more fires, and there really weren't too many people to put the fires out. So when the bell rang in town, often people might come to run, but they were there to watch usually. You know, they brought their marshmallows. It was bad. So everybody but the owner of the building, or maybe the insurance company that was insuring the building, or maybe the friends and family would be heartbroken at what was going on. But the rest of the people, it was kind of like in England back in the 16th century, where a good hanging was a lot of fun. You know, you go out and watch people get hanged. Fires were kind of the same way. But it became very expensive to business owners, and as Bloomfield started to grow, that was certainly a problem. And then there was an incident in about the winter of 1882-83, where a place called the John Archdeacon Hotel, located somewhere along Bloomfield Center, maybe the corner of Washington and Bloomfield Avenue. The Archdeacon Hotel, there's a photograph in one of the books, the Bloomfield history books, but there's a group of men standing in front of it. But I don't know that it's 100% that building. But that building burned during the winter of 1882-83. And now, what happened was, you see the slide right here, who did we call on to come put out the fires in Bloomfield? The Newark Fire Department would come and put out the fires. And they would come clopping down the road. You'd hear the horses flying down. But by the time they got here, it was usually a total loss. Everything was gone. But they were still dragging these poor guys out. Now, when do you think Newark went to a fully paid department? A little bit before Bloomfield, for sure. It was about 1889, but up until that point, they were volunteers. So in 1882, they were volunteers. They were leaving their homes. They were leaving whatever business they were in and going to Bloomfield, usually too late. And then all the people in Bloomfield would be standing there like, oops, you know, and all these businesses were burning. Until one day, a man named David E. Benedict, he was a chief in Newark of fire department. I checked him on Ancestry. I looked him up, and he definitely was a chief. And he finally got there, and the Archdeacon was just rubble. But his group had to come and put it out, what was left of it. And he was mad. He was just really, really annoyed. And he said, listen, Bloomfield, you have to get your act together. I'm not coming down here again unless you do something about raising funds to get a fire department right away. So they were like, well, I don't know what we're going to do about that. And he stood there and he said, well, I'm not coming back until you do something. So he left and he went on his way. Now, we talked about family ties a little bit. I'm going to advance to the next slide. And this gentleman here is Frederick B. Gardner. He was my great-grandfather. You can see his dates there. He was a volunteer Newark firefighter, hose company number 3, according to his obituary. And I think he may have known David E. Benedict, because when I looked up David Benedict in the census, he was a silver plater in Newark. That was the occupation of my great-grandfather. So there's a chance that he might have been one of those poor guys who had to come in here and put out fires. But David Benedict said, you got to do something. So what happened was, if we can move to the next slide. So what happened was, there was a group of concerned citizens who decided they were going to raise some funds and start to take this seriously, because the insurance rates were through the ceiling. And it was just too much of a loss. The town was trying to grow. People were losing businesses. So there they were. They got together. And on June 27th of 1883, the Essex Hook and Ladder Company was formed. They had raised about $1,600. What kind of things did they need to purchase? Any guesses?
A hook and ladder.
A hook and ladder truck. They did that. What else?
Horses.
Horses. How about a bell? Yeah, they had to have a bell as well. So they formed this company. Now, if we could just advance it another page. So they ended up forming a hook and ladder company and 3 hose companies over the next couple of years. Now, the township did not take ownership of the fire department until about 1885. But between 83 and 85, they formed the 3 companies, and they needed some hierarchy here. So they hired the very first chief engineer. That was the name of the title back then. And his name was Andrew Marsh. I tried to look up to see what I could find on him. The only thing I know is he had a lot of different occupations, that he was a fire marshal at one time. And I found out he was born in 1845, which is the year Andrew Jackson, President Jackson, died. And that's why I think his name was Andrew Jackson Marsh. So he was actually the first chief. So he kind of ran things. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. Okay, these are just some really cool photographs that we've been able to get. The Active Hose Company, the first hose company was just called like the Hose Company number 1. It was later changed to the name Phoenix Hose Company. The Active was number 2, and you can see here, this was on Orange Street. And you can see it's a fully horse-drawn carriage. There's a little, I think there's is there a young boy there in the picture as well? And then if we could go to the next one, the Excelsior Hose Company number 3 on Broad and James Street. Does anybody know what's there now? Broad and James, the corner? Oh, really? Okay, okay. So there is that location is where that hose company was. So we're going to get a little bit closer up picture in the next one. This was called a 4-wheeled hose jumper. Now this photo is from 1890, but it was formed a little earlier than that. But it was hand pulled, so they'd have to drag these things out. This is still a lot of manual work, isn't it? And they had to get this stuff going pretty quickly. Now the original companies were made up of about 30 men in the hose companies, maybe a little more in the hook and ladder company. It sounds like a lot of men, but remember, they were volunteers. They may have been, working in their wheelwright shop. They could have been making cabinets. You don't know what they were doing, but they had to count on a number of these guys getting out there. So that was through about 1890. Now, one of the things that they had was, if we could back up to that bell picture, Jamie, if you wouldn't mind, because I talked about purchasing the bell. This, by the way, guys, is great. I love the fact you have this out there. It was purchased, weighed 2,068 pounds. It was purchased by the McShane Bell Foundry Company in Baltimore. And this is what was originally used to summon the firemen to fires. And eventually, of course, they went to an electric bell alarm at about the turn of the century. But as the town grew and they needed more coverage, in about the year 1904, the people in South Bloomfield started to clamor for more fire protection. There we go. Okay, does anybody recognize this, where this house is now? I see Rich shaking his head, yes. Yes, Jerome Place. Well, coincidentally, when Kelly and I were not first married, but after we had just been married a little while, we moved to a house at 140 Jerome Place, and I kept walking by this building, and I looked at it, and I could see the outline of a garage door that was like cemented in and fixed up. And I thought to myself, that looks like it was a garage at the corner of Berkeley and Jerome. It looked like almost like a garage type of a thing. That was the original place. It was moved, and then they replaced it with a couple-story structure. They had bathrooms and stuff upstairs, and that was that covered the people down in the south part of town. That was the Montgomery Hose Company number 4. So we've got 4 hose companies. So can we move to the next slide? In 1905, we moved the Phoenix Hose Company, number 1, in with the Essex Hook and Ladder. So now you had a headquarters on Bloomfield Avenue. This was approximately where the Royal Theater was, next, sort of close to it. Anybody remember the Royal Theater? Okay. This building, I've just been informed, is still there. And I'd like to, I don't know what it is now, but I'd like to go investigate and sort of picture myself standing in where this all happened.
Bridal shop.
Bridal shop. So I'm going to just mosey into the bridal shop and start asking about the fire department. Oh, I can rent a tuxedo. Okay, my wife is giving me water here. I guess I'm getting parched. Well, let me tell you about when they opened that building, because boy, did they do it up right. It was a big celebration. On the same day, and it was Decoration Day, which is another name for what holiday? Memorial Day. On Decoration Day, they had a parade, they had a banquet, and they had over 1,000 people come in and look at their equipment and tour the new firehouse, which had an upstairs and all this, that, and the other. And during the afternoon, they had an additional 3 fire alarms. So parade, banquet, open house, 3 fire alarms. So it was quite a big day at the new fire headquarters. This picture is from 1905. So if we can go to the next one. Parades were big time here. I know you still have great parades here. This picture, 1910. We're getting towards a kind of a change time here, so get ready for this. So they're all decked out here. Obviously, it's still a horse-drawn ladder truck. And now the next picture, if I can put up, is headquarters. It's decked out with flags. They did things really upright. Now something happened between 1910 and 1912. A first took place. Anybody want to guess?
Motorized.
No, but you're real close on motorized. The first paid fireman came on the department. His name was Archie M. Heath, who we're going to talk about in a little while. So here it is. This is the headquarters. So 1912, we're getting close to World War I. We're still, they're growing. The department's growing. Around the turn of the century, their alarm system went from just being a bell that would be pulled and rang to more of an electronic system. They did have some alarms. It wasn't too robust. But we're going to go to the next picture. We're now at 1914. World War I in Europe is broken out. And Bloomfield has its first what?
Fire truck.
Motorized vehicle. 1914. So what do you notice about this picture? First of all, the two gentlemen are on the left, Ed Vesterman, and on the right, Tom Hayes. And we have a descendant, I think, of Mr. Vesterman. Is that true?
My grandfather.
Your grandfather. So we have that's happening a lot now. I'm getting all kinds of messages from people on Facebook who are related to different firefighters, and it's so cool. I love it. I love it. And I'm not from Bloomfield, but I love it. I love it. So what do you notice about it? Do you see a crank? It's a crank. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, but those things could take your arm off. If that thing started up, bang, it would take your arm off. You had to be really careful, so you can see it there. But there's one other thing that maybe you don't notice. What do you notice about the wheels?
Solid rubber tires.
Who said that? Correct. solid rubber tires. So you can imagine, I mean, I complain about our Honda Fit that it doesn't take potholes too well. Thank you, Wes Caldwell. Oh, I didn't say that. But it bangs up the car. It's more the car's shocks, I guess. But anyway, back then, those hard rubber tires, they didn't really give a smooth ride, did they? And if you had them sitting in a garage, the rubber would get flat. So they had to jack them up to lift them off the floor while it wasn't in use, because it could create bad steering, and if you're in a hurry, you know, the fireman could fly off the back. By the way, can you only imagine on those horse-drawn fire wagons, when they were racing from Newark to Bloomfield, how many firemen may have fallen off the back? I had a boss years ago. His grandfather was a fireman on the Boston Fire Department during something called the Great Molasses Flood of 1919, if anybody's ever heard of that, when a giant molasses tank broke open. And his grandfather went to that fire, and it wasn't long after that he was thrown from the back of a fire truck and sustained serious injuries. He may even have died. So it was dangerous business. But that was in the fire department headquarters on Bloomfield Avenue. Next slide. We're now in 1917. The United States is in the First World War, and you can see that the headquarters is filled with a lot of motorized vehicles now, aren't they? So we're really phasing out the old horse-drawn vehicles. Can we go to the next one? All right, let's talk about the fun of the fire department. First of all, I'm proud to say that this bash, which took place on June 9th, 1928, if you notice the General Committee, Fred E. Gardner, chairman. Well, that's a big committee of people, isn't it? So what I'm going to point out here is that look at the events that happened here. You've got a luncheon, you've got and here's the thing, firemen will luncheon at the American La France Engine Company plant. Then you go down a little bit, there's another luncheon at the American La France plant. There's a block dance. Then women guests will luncheon at the Park Methodist Episcopal Church. Why were they separating the firefighters from the women? It was 1928, which was during what? Prohibition. What was going on over at the American La France plant? Why didn't they want their wives there with them? I don't know. Did they ever have dry wet downs? Does that exist? But anyway, they had a really good time. This is a year before what? The Great Depression. The stock market crashed, but they were living the high life here. These here were the volunteers. These are the volunteer firemen. I wanted to give you a little summary of, and back up a little. I mentioned about the first paid firemen in 1911 in Bloomfield. Prior to 1911, all volunteers. From 1883 to 1911, volunteers. By 1931, there were 40 paid and 130 volunteers. They even had their own chief. Did you know that? The volunteers had their own chief. In 1931, there was a man by the name of, I think it was John Yeager, I think. And the man who was the chief was George Kober. Then in 1938, it went completely paid. It went to a completely paid department. So all those volunteers went away. They started something called an auxiliary program. So the auxiliary firefighters would be, presumably helping out where needed. And then something happened called World War II, right? And they used those auxiliary during World War II. That's why they had them. But they didn't have a lot of control over those firefighters. They weren't kind of like fully trained as much. They weren't probably not sworn. I don't know for a fact, but it wasn't working out. So they eventually did bring back some of those firefighters as volunteers. And today in 2025, if the figures haven't changed since I spoke with Chief Anesia, it's 78 career and between 10 and 15 volunteers. So not called auxiliary anymore. So if we could change the slide. So what's been really thrilling while I've been doing this project is that I've been sort of allowed to come to the fire department and on the corner of Franklin and Montgomery and sort of look at these old pictures, and I was trying to picture what it was like standing where my grandfather stood so long ago. And it was a very moving experience. And I found this plaque. And strangely enough, I got a message on Facebook from the grandson of, you can see under councilman, it says Alfred Cockfair is his name, chairman. He lives in Delaware, and he said, do you think I heard there was a bronze plaque that had my grandfather's name on it. Could you see if you could find that? Can you ask somebody about it? And I found it, and I sent him the picture. He was thrilled. He was thrilled to see his grandfather's name. So this is 1930. This is the brand new headquarters on Montgomery and Franklin. So if we could get the next picture. Okay, my grandfather is the 5th one from the left. He looks really short next to that big guy next to him. And this was probably another decoration day in front of the headquarters that we are familiar with today. If we can go to the next one. This is another one, 1931. You can see these are probably those, they're obviously motorized vehicle at the new headquarters. Okay, and if we could move it. Okay, who knows what this is besides what I wrote on it? Gamewell. Is there anybody on the department in the back of the room, or anybody who's retired from the department, who remembers when those were still in use? I see some nods. Yes. Okay. Why did we take them out of use?
False alarms.
False alarms. Correct. All right. So I mentioned they had a rudimentary electric alarm system back at the turn of the century. In 1932, they greatly expanded the system, and they included many more alarm boxes. And if we could, here's what it looks like from the outside. This is now you open the door. There's a lever that you pull down. A code would go to a dispatching place. And I believe back in 1932, they moved that across the street. And they would get a code, and then they would dispatch the department to that location. And then eventually the firefighters would have to reset the box in the next picture and close it back up again. They were not taken out of, they were put in 1932, they were not taken out of service in 2012, till 2012. And that was due, of course, to massive false alarms, because anything that came through there would most likely be false, because you have radios, you have cell phones, you have 911. By the way, who can guess what decade did 911 first, come into being?
1980s.
We put it through AI, didn't we? It was 1970s. It was the 1970s, the first 911. By the way, I wanted to back up on one thing, is that when the Bloomfield Fire Department first came into being, one of the things they needed was a water line. And that water line, they went through the Orange Water Company, and they purchased about 10 miles of water line and 96 hydrants, which it took about 6 months to test. By 1911, you had 30 miles of line and 200 hydrants. And I don't know what it is now, but I'm sure it's a pretty big number. Okay, next one. These are just some cool photographs. This, I think, is in front of where we are now. Is that what you say, Rich? Yeah, I took a guess, 1950s. This was a parade. Very nice. I thought it was a cool shot. Now, this one here, you're going to like this one. I like the dog. When I was working with the two ladies, Caroline and Claire, at the museum, they found this with me, and we thought this was like a really cool shot. Actually, Claire, I think I was going to use another one, and you said you should use this one, so I put it in. And lo and behold, I got a message from a gentleman. He's in his 80s. He lives up in Massachusetts. He's a Bloomfield High School grad. He lived here in his youth, and he sent me a story that he thought I would like. He was about 7 years old. It was in the 1940s. I remember having a young buddy pal who suggested one day we have to run away from home. So we put together some of our favorite candies, which was going to be our lunch. I guess I tied them in a piece of cloth and set off on what we thought would be our long journey away from home. Guess how far we got? We only made it as far as the Bloomfield Fire Station. We stopped there to pet their dog, a Dalmatian dog, I think, and a friendly fireman came out and asked us where we were going. When we told him we were running away from home, he asked us where we lived. We told him, and he called our parents to tell them he was keeping us at the fire station until they would come get us. Naturally, my mother was angry at first, but laughed when she learned we only made it to the fire station. What I do remember was how friendly the guys in the fire station were to us youngsters, and would wave hello when we walked past that fire station. Funny how you remember those stories like that. Maybe it's because I'm so old now and looking back on past memories. I just thought I'd pass it on to you. These are the fun stories I've been hearing since we've started this project. So, thank you, Roger Hall. He actually was one of my guests on my podcast. He has a website called AmericanMusicPreservation.com. He loves music history. So that's kind of I kind of like to think that that was the dog. Okay, next photo. I just picked this because it's cool. So what was the public safety vehicle? Any guesses? I don't know. That was an ambulance. Oh, okay. Does anybody know who the fireman is? Any guesses? I don't know. I figured I'd put it up there, but I just like the car. Okay, another cool vehicle. The next one. I don't know any Bloomfield vehicle experts there, but I would say this is probably... Yes, sir, at the back.
67.
A 1953 LaFrance.
Because my dad bought one from Bloomfield. He restored and refurbished. I have a picture of it.
Wow, cool. Your dad bought it and restored it.
Yeah, that was the style. And you can still read Bloomfield engine flying.
I love it. And LaFrance is where they had the beer blast back in 1928, right? Okay, we're going to look at the next one here is the headquarters, probably in the 1950s. It's funny, you see the building. The building doesn't change, does it? But the vehicles in front of it change. And that's what's so interesting here. Okay, before we go to the next slide, we just gave away the game. No, it's okay. How many people here remember the Broad Bay bowling alley? Did anybody bowl there? So people bowled. I remember passing it all the time. The Broad Bay bowling alley was, I think it opened in 1940. It was, just after people were coming out of the Depression. There used to be a bowling alley on Bloomfield Avenue next to the Royal Theater, which I'm gonna find a picture of that alley someday. But my grandfather used to manage that. But he was gone by 1940. So anyway, Broad Bay, it had a full luncheonette in there from the 1940s through probably the end of the 50s. And then it converted to vending machines. We know how fresh the food in vending machines is. And then in 1965, they actually installed a microwave. Can you imagine how much power that microwave drove? It must have... I remember my mother had a waffle iron for when she got married in the 40s, and you plug it in, all the power in West Caldwell would go into that waffle maker. But yeah, they had a microwave there. Well, it was on July 7th. It was 1977, and it was the owner had just closed up shop. It was a slow night, and he closed up shop, and he had gotten home. I think he lived on Barbara Street, and he got a banging on his door that the bowling alley was on fire. There's a couple really incredible pictures here, but I don't know the science much, but I do know that the way that the bowling alley was designed, that it went up fast, and there was some gallant efforts made to save it, but it was a lost cause. If we go to the next one, James, there's a better shot of it here. Yes, sir.
I had a police scanner years ago, and the call came over for a fire. First fire engineer sent help. Radioed and sent a mutual aid help.
And you heard that?
So bad already. The first fire engineer.
General alarm. Really, really bad. It was, and it was a summer night, and I'll tell you that bowling alley, it was never rebuilt. It was never rebuilt. But there is, I don't know, Lou, I hope it's okay for me to share this story. But Lou, you were actually indirectly at the scene of the fire ground managing things, weren't you? Lou's Chief Venetia's mom was expecting him, and she was watching the Broaden Bay bowling alley. So he was supervising. Even then, he was supervising. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, Federal Shoe Store, Bloomfield Center. Okay, this was the central building where it is actually, now we're getting closer in history here. This is where we're going to get more and more experts in the crowd. Federal Shoe Store, a building was called the Central Building. It was built in 1892, and the building was there for quite a while until this time when a fire broke out, and the Federal Shoe Store was on the bottom floor, and above it was the Beneficial Finance Company. So as it was a big fire. You had Bloomfield there, you had East Orange there, you had Newark there, you had Glen Ridge there, and much to their horror and maybe some people's delight who were just spectators, the safe in the Beneficial Finance office came crashing through the second story, through the first story, and right through to the basement. So thank goodness nobody was injured by that. That would have been really, really terrible. So yeah, you can see the after effects, and that was Christmas time, 1978. The next photo, I don't know for a fact, because I got this from the museum. It's from some of the photos that the fire department shared with the museum. I just say it's got a Christmas tree. It looks the same vicinity. I'm thinking it might be related to the same fire, but there's been a number of fires in the center, as you all know. Anybody think?
I think that's Barry across the street.
Okay, so it's across the street. Glenwood Avenue.
That's the Roxy sign under the Christmas tree.
Okay. All right, so it's not the same. It's not the same fire then, but it's a cool shot. It's definitely a Christmas time, probably the 1970s. Okay, then next one. All right, this one, I don't have a lot of information about it. All I do know is that it was a pretty terrible fire. 1980, it was the Center School. The Center School was if I have my history right, the second oldest school building in Bloomfield. I think predated by what used to be the original high school. It might be an administrative office, which is where my grandfather would have gone to high school. And it was, I don't believe it was actually a functioning school at the time. It may have been an administrative office.
College.
Oh, it was owned by the college? Anyway, you could see, I have several photos only because these are incredible shots. And I want to thank the Bloomfield Fire Department for these shots, and Mark Rossetti for doing a great job on the book, the new book from 2023.
St. John's.
Okay. Yeah, my dad went to that school, Center School, and now go to the next photo, James. And maybe the next one as well. Yeah, you can see it was quite the event. Now, I understand, I may be wrong, but there were 2 firefighters who were trapped upstairs and had to jump.
Yeah.
Is that true? Sudol was one of them.
We have the second floor window.
Right. Yep. I was able to talk to Joe McCarthy, your former chief, and he had indicated there were a couple of firefighters who were trapped upstairs, but thankfully got out okay. Next photo, James. So I took a walk and a couple of weeks ago, and I saw this old sort of creepy tree kind of overlooking a parking lot behind it. Now, I think Center School is probably a little to the right here, but I just thought what did that tree see over the years? It probably saw my father playing in the schoolyard back in the 20s, and it probably saw endless numbers of children in this community go to the school there, and it witnessed a lot of brave firefighters fighting that terrible blaze. But thankfully, no one was killed in that fire. But I thought it was kind of a creepy reminder of all that went on there. Next one, Jane, please. Just a cool fire engine. I loved it.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, my dad went to the fires and the riots in Newark in '67, and the trucks were still open at the time, and they were hurling bricks at them from the buildings.
Oh,
So
gosh.
this would have been probably one of the first ones with a roof.
Yeah, because this is 71, so it was a couple years after, right, the riots? Okay. All right, we're going to talk about we're going to go to the next photo. All right, let's talk about the fun stuff, all the great stuff that the Bloomfield Fire Department does for the community. You can see here we got Santa Claus who's on duty, and there's so many other things that this department does to help the community. And if we can go to the next slide, you see, I think we see the Grinch over there. We got the Grinch, we got some Santas, we got lights, so the kids are obviously having fun with this. And then we also keep the kids safe in the community. You have a firefighter here inspecting the car seats, so important, particularly if you have fathers or grandfathers like me who are completely spastic with putting those seats in. I've had 3 daughters, 5 grandchildren, and I still can't figure out, I have to ask my wife to do it. So, anyway, next one. Okay, we're going to get on to Fred in a second. But just some of the other things that Bloomfield Fire Department does. Car seat safety, community CPR courses, school visits, which is so important. The kids love that. Open houses where they demonstrate fire safety and give tips. Girls on Fire Youth Camp. So training, giving young women as little girls an idea of what it's like for a female to go into the firefighting occupation. So that's cool. Children's library reading. I think I've stumbled into the library a couple times where I've seen the firefighters reading to the kids. Then there's the Firefighter Friday. There's a mouthful. That's in the summer, I think, Lou. And that's something that's really, they're reading and playing to the kids. I know my 2 grandsons will be thrilled with doing that. And of course, the Christmas cheer that goes on. So next slide is Fred E. Gardner, my grandfather. He probably went into the firefighting business because his father did it, but he was in Bloomfield. A little background on him. He was a councilman here in the 20s. He loved everything to do with Bloomfield. Everything was Bloomfield. He used to get out of his car. He actually tracked somebody down who was speeding. He was a councilman. Did you ever do that, Rich? No. And he chased them down and arrested them as a councilman for speeding. I mean, he loved everything, and he was a volunteer fireman. Now, I showed you a building before that had a lot of flags on it, and that's kind of cool and all that. He was a flag decorator. That's what he did as an occupation. And he was so good at it, he used to jump from building to building. He was a master with a ladder. He could do anything on a ladder. As a matter of fact, he got the nickname the Human Fly. So I imagine that came in handy for the fire department, I think. And then, ironically, My grandfather was late coming down for his coffee, but my grandmother took the opportunity to wax the stairs in their house on Belleville Avenue. And the human fly, as he was coming down to get his coffee, he slipped. He was wearing Argyle socks, nice new pair, and he fell down the entire flight of stairs. And consequently, he was laid up for weeks with broken ribs. So his little reputation as a human fly was tarnished just a little bit. But he was very civic-minded. He had a lot of interest in the town. So this is where I started getting interested in the fire department and firefighting history, because of him, his history, and of course Felix the fireman, the Stone Fireman. So if we could just change, here we go. Okay, this is from the 2023 book that the fire department put out. First of all, I wanted to continue the legacy of firefighting. So being a resident of West Caldwell, I was 40 years old at the time, I decided to become a volunteer. So I signed up, I went to Fire Academy, and I was working full-time, but I was doing that, and I was loving it. And then it came time for my very first call. And I had the red Proby helmet on, and we got a report. It was Christmas Day. Kelly couldn't believe I had to go out on Christmas Day. I went out. Somebody's roast was on fire, I think, in their oven. And as we're pulling up, my heart's pounding out of my chest. It's my first time. And I had my pack on. I was in the engine. I popped the door open. I look out. There's a whole group of people, some of them I knew, standing out there. I thought, this is my chance, my legacy, the family legacy. I tripped over somebody's boot, and I fell out of the engine onto my face in front of about 25 people who were standing there. And I thought, I've just tarnished the legacy of the Gardner firefighters. Anyway, don't worry, West Caldwell's safe. I no longer am on the department, but I loved it. I had 5 years there. I met a lot of great guys. I had a really good time, and I'm glad I did it. And I can only imagine you guys doing that for years and what you run into. It's a great, great, noble occupation. Okay, so let's talk about Felix. And we'll make this move a little faster now. You can see on the left, you've got our Stone Fireman. He's on the corner of Montgomery and Franklin. And then the picture on the right is the one I want you to look at. That is Felix standing alongside of the Fireman's Insurance Company on the corner of Broad and Market Street in Newark. But do you know that's not the first location of that insurance company? I mean, it is the first location. It's not the first building at that location. In 1869, a fireman's insurance building was put in that location, and it had a wooden fireman. Anybody ever hear about the wooden fireman story? Oh, you're going to love it. So here's the wooden fireman there. It was there till 1909. They tore the building down to build a new one, and they put up a new fireman. So the wooden fireman gets thrown into a salvage yard. The salvage yard, the Butler Fire Department finds out about it. They want the fireman. So they sent two volunteers all the way down to Newark to pull the wooden fireman out of the junk heap. But Bloomfield wanted it too. So the legend is that a couple of Bloomfield firefighters lay in wait for the Butler firemen to come by with the wooden fireman, right? They come through, I guess, Bloomfield. They ambush the Butler guys, and they're fighting over the wooden guy, right? Back and forth, back and forth. And in the tussle, or the fracas, as the legend says, his left foot comes off. The Bloomfield firefighters scatter, and the Butler people bring him up there. So they get up to Butler. They say, we've got him. We're going to put him in a prominent place. But guess what? He's missing his left foot. So they had a woodmaker remake the foot. But what he did was, he remade the right foot. So he had two right feet. And they said it's the only case where two rights make a wrong. Anyway, the new Fireman's Insurance Building. It is now in place, but it's not there long. From say 1909 until 1929, the people who were like to look out their window at a nice view had this big statue blocking it. So they wanted the firemen ripped off. So they took Felix, the current Felix, off the side of the Fireman Insurance Company. They put it in a scrapyard. So if we could move this. They put it in a scrapyard, but good old Grandpa Frederick Gardner decides, always thinking about Bloomfield. He goes down there in 1931 and he buys Felix. I still don't know how his name came about, but bought Felix and brought him up to Bloomfield. Paid $25 for him in 1931. My grandmother must have had a canary because it was the Depression. Flag decorating was not a big thing to be doing in the Depression. There were probably arguing, according to my father, there were arguments that my grandmother wanted my grandfather to become a paid fireman. But he wanted to still do the firefighting and give his business a try. It wasn't working. But he paid $25. And Felix was brought into town. And this picture here was from a parade in 1933. It was for the 50th anniversary of the fire department. And I want to call your attention to the man on the left. His name was Frank Wisner. He was the only still active original fireman from the 1883 fire department. He actually, I did a little research on him. It said he was a tinsmith originally, and then he was a plumber after that. Now I found there was a business in Watsessing Center that was a tin and plumbing. So I imagine he probably worked there. But he was on the float here where Felix was making his appearance. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the story about the memorial that you see there today. So Rich Rockwell was giving a tour to Kelly and me, and we were going through all the rich history of the Morris Canal and all that. And then we were talking just about general history, and Kelly, because I'm always thinking, I'd love to do something to recognize the history of him. Kelly says to Rich, do you think we could do something to put a memorial there or something like that? And I was like horrified. I was like, oh no, she showed our hand right away. Here, we got to negotiate this, And then Rich says, you know what? That sounds interesting. Lou Venezia is very interested in preserving Bloomfield Fire Department history. Why don't we talk to him? So we worked a little project out, and our family, with the help of Lou and Rich and some others, we had this dedication for the memorial here. It's basically Felix the Stone Fireman, and it's tells a story, rescued from Fireman's Insurance Company, but most importantly, it's dedicated to the past, present, and future firefighters of Bloomfield. So thank you to you all. Okay, so that was really cool. We loved it. So on Memorial Day, it gets even cooler. Memorial Day, we were invited down, and in 2023, and the firefighters did a memorial service in front of Felix with the new memorial, and that was really delightful. My family came to that. The next slide. I have 4 of my grandchildren there, and one of them wasn't born yet. Right, Jamie? And so there's the family history right there. So then, before we go to the next slide, a few months later, we get a call from Lou, and he says, can you and Kelly come down here? I want to show you something. So we turn here. This beautiful, beautiful memorial patio. And I got to say, we were both moved to tears, because not only for the family legacy that it preserved, because my grandfather loved this town, he really did, and he loved the fire department, but it was just a beautiful memory and encouragement for firefighters of all eras and times, you know what I mean? So we got moved by that. But while we were looking at this, I looked over at the stone on the right. This is the stone we saw. And we were looking at it. And I said to Kelly, I said, there's something that I just noticed about this stone. The man named John Marshall. He died in 1955. And it occurred to me that my father used to talk about a friend of his, a boyhood friend, named John Jr. Marshall. And my mother, after my father passed away, my mother said, my father wasn't a crier, but she said he cried twice. One time was when my brother had pneumonia and almost died. And the second time was when his good childhood friend, Junior Marshall, died. And he was moved to tears. So I went looking through some old family photographs, and here's a picture I came up with. So here I got my Felix. You know, you got the story of my grandfather spending the budget on $25 budget on some, Felix. And then you've got this wonderful story of this friend of my father's. And I just thought, I'm so glad that we did this, because it's so important. So if we could go to the next slide here. Firefighter John E. Marshall Jr. died in the line of duty 1955. The date was December 28, 1955. It was about 9:45 a.m. There was a call that went out. It was probably a minor fire. It was a barn, I think, involved, Franklin and Race Streets. And John Marshall had a couple of major duties. One of them was, he was the guy you went to do all the administrative work. He did a ton of the paperwork. But he also drove the chief's car. He drove the chief to the fire. And on that day, that morning, as they were arriving at the fire, he had a massive heart attack, and he passed away that very same morning in the line of duty, leaving a widow and 2 small children. Anyway, I'm very pleased to say that we have John Marshall's daughter here tonight, as well as his nephew. So we're gonna see them in a second. Let's go to the next slide here. Archie M. Heath. Sorry about the granularity here. I couldn't quite get a better picture, but I would like to eventually get one. Now, I mentioned about Archie Heath. He was the first paid fireman, 1911. He joined Bloomfield Fire Department as a member of the Phoenix Hose Company in 1895. And then, in 1937, the chief at the time, who had been a long-time chief, his name was Chief Kober, he retired, and his assistant chief was Archie Heath. There was talk about maybe bringing in a battalion chief from a bigger city to replace the chief, or maybe even given a more specific written test or something to Archie. But most people really wanted him to be chief. So for a while he was acting as chief. 42 years of service. Month of November. The first 2 weeks of November, there were 56 calls already while he was acting chief. One article from a newspaper right before he passed away, he had put out a notice to have all broken toys that could be assembled or donated to come to the fire department so the firemen could rebuild the toys in time for Christmas for the needy. Now remember, these weren't plastic junk toys back then. 1937, they were probably a lot sturdier and wood, so the firemen fixed those. Anyway, it was up in the Brookdale section, Norwood and Broughton. There had been a call. I think it might even have been a false alarm or a minor fire. And sadly, while Archie was directing the apparatus to leave the scene. He was hit by a car and was broken up very badly, broken ribs, other bones, and he was taken to the hospital. But during that 4 days, the town and the fire department made him chief. So when he passed away, he was chief of the Bloomfield Fire Department. Thank you, Archie Heath. Next photograph. Oh, by the way, we have two great granddaughters here of Archie's, and a great grandson-in-law as well. So next photo. Okay, George Connor Sr. went by the name of Buddy. He had almost 25 years of service. He lived on Montgomery Street, so he used to walk to the fire department at headquarters until he was transferred up to Brookdale section. A fire came in. It was October 20th, 1971. It was a house on Birch Street, working house fire, resident trapped. He was one of the first ones to the trapped individual. He was attempting to pull the individual out of the house while offering his air mask to that person. Sadly, the stress on his respiratory system and his heart, he actually passed away and died at Mountainside Hospital shortly afterward. He was 55 years old. He had 9 children, 6 of them still at home. Some, I think, as young as 6 years old. I spoke to his grandson, Steve Motzer. He's retired from the department. I think he was deputy chief. And he told me about his grandfather. Unfortunately, nobody was able to make it tonight from the family, but we are going to honor him, honor the family afterward. So, we're going to stop here for 1 second because we have something that we want to do. We're going to ask Chief Venetia if he could come up here. We have something for the family members. If we could put the first, we could put John Marshall's photo up there. I'd like Joanne Odell to please come forward with Brian and Jolene. Brian is the nephew of John Marshall, and Joanne is the daughter.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We want to, from the Bloomfield Fire Department, offer a certificate of remembrance. This certificate is in honor of John Edward Marshall Jr., recognizing firefighter John Edward Marshall Jr. for 12 years of dedicated service to the Bloomfield Fire Department. He passed away on December 28, 1955, after suffering a heart attack while driving the fire chief to a working barn fire near Ray Street. His commitment and sacrifice in the line of duty will always be remembered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I would also now like Nancy Boots Christian and her husband Rob and Jean Duncan, the great-granddaughters of Archie M. Heath.
He's not coming up.
He can certainly come.
This certificate in honor of Archie M. Heath, recognizing Fire Chief Archie M. Heath, the first paid member of the Bloomfield Fire Department, for 42 years of dedicated service. Chief Heath passed away November 24th, 1937, 4 days after being struck by an automobile at Norwood and Broughton while directing the return of apparatus following a false alarm. His unwavering commitment and sacrifice will always be remembered.
Chief Venetia, is it, do we have the others? Can we get the other certificate just to read? Sure. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
This is for firefighter George Connor Sr.
This certificate in honor of George Connor Sr., recognizing firefighter George Connor Sr., who on October 20th, 1971, collapsed while heroically attempting to rescue a trapped third-floor tenant during a structure fire on Birch Street. He was transported to the hospital, but sadly passed away shortly after. Firefighter Connor was in his 25th year of dedicated service with the Bloomfield Fire Department. His courage and sacrifice will always be remembered.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you to the families for coming tonight, and we will be getting this certificate to the family of firefighter Connor. Jamie, if we could just put the... Okay, so last week, my wife Kelly and I went down to visit a lady in Yardley, Pennsylvania. Her name is Marion McCartney Ray. She was born in Bloomfield. She grew up. She's 102. She was born in 1923. She lived in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and probably the first couple years of the 50s in Bloomfield, Walnut Terrace. When she was 12 years old, her father passed away. Her brother was only 11. It was the middle of the Depression. They didn't have much money at all. They had to convert their home to a rental to make ends meet. Her mother did cleaning. They had a rough time. I told her what I was doing here tonight, and she said she had a special message. She wanted to thank the Bloomfield Fire Department for keeping her and her family safe during that very, very difficult time in the 1930s. So thank you from your 102-year-old or 2-year-old young Marion. There's our man Felix. We're here for Felix. And then I want to thank the fire department for your kindness that you have all shown to our family. Not everybody would go with this. Some people might say, I don't know, this guy's his grandfather was on 100 years ago. Well, I mean, who cares? But this department, as well as Rich Rockwell, former Councilman Rockwell, would just embrace this with us. We love what you do for this history. We love what this Historical Society... I love your Facebook page, by the way. I love it. I love following all the old pictures. It's a great organization. And the devotion to history and preserving the legacy of Bloomfield's bravest. Thank you. And I want to give credits to Bloomfield Fire Department. You've got them all here. All these folks donated photographs. There's piles of them at the museum. It's wonderful. And then also extra help that we've gotten from the folks here. And I really want to thank Caroline and Claire for enduring me at the museum, with me looking for stuff and helping me scan things. And of course, Kim, you were really putting those certificates together. You've been wonderful. And I want to thank my daughter, Jamie, and my son-in-law, Sean, Ferrum Films. Sean is filming this right now, and Jamie's been my co-pilot. And I want to thank my wife, Kelly. Are there any questions? I'm almost afraid. Yes, sir.
Where was the American La France factory?
I was afraid you were going to ask that. I was going to look that up. Rich?
It's still there.
France Avenue, yeah.
On La France Avenue, it's still there.
Really?
It's still there. It's a plastic manufacturing company.
So that's where they made this fire apparatus. We have a couple more questions? Yes.
Did the person that Buddy Connor was trying to save, did they survive?
I understand they did not. They did not survive. I think it was an elderly gentleman, and it was on either second or third story. I did hear, though, from Steve Motzer that when Steve joined the department, he met a man, I think he was a captain at the time, who was a child who lived in that house when that fire took place. Some of you may know more about it. Anybody else? I know it's getting late, it's getting warm in here, but one more? Any more? We have a maybe?
Oh,
Yeah.
I remember
Yes, sir.
as a kid in the 50s, there was an accident where a fire engine that rolled over on, I think it was Bay Avenue, just past St. Valentine's, going down the street to make the turn where Essex Manor is.
Oh, really?
And it went over into the tree. I thought several firemen got killed or hurt. As a kid, I was only a
Yeah,
kid.
no, I get it.
But the next day, there was all kinds of people looking.
Milling around.
And the tree is still there, I think, and you can still see where the bark was ripped off the tree.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. That's interesting history, though. But okay, we're good? Going once, twice? Yes, ma'am.
Just the Broadway bowling alley. Is that where the 7-Eleven is now?
Yes, right? 7-Eleven. I never bowled there, but I used to pass it all the time.
I wrote an article about that fire for the newsletter in 2012, and you can go on our archives. I interviewed the owner, who's quite elderly now, and if you want to read more about it, it's on our website.
Yes, the Town Crier, by the way, wonderful publication. And I've used that along with the two wonderful history books, the one for the 100th and the one for the 140th. So they're cool to check out. Yes, sir.
When you're talking about the Broad Bay fire, like I said, I heard it on the scanner. I went down. I was where the garden center is now.
Mm-hmm.
You could feel the heat from the fire all the way over there. And they were worried the gas station was going to go up.
Oh, gosh.
Because I had all the gas there.
Yeah, that would have been crazy.
They had the firemen were on the roof punching holes in, right? And all of a sudden the call went out, get off the roof. And they got up, and all of a sudden the roof just melted right down there.
I'm not sure they had the full cause of that. There have been speculation, but I'm not sure. But anyway, thank you all. I've had a great time, and thank you to everybody. Oh, we have something here.
Brought some memorabilia.
Uh-oh.
On those credits your day before.
Yep.
My father's name was the second name on the list, Grant Miller.
Grant Miller, thank you.
This is an 1890 Chief's helmet. This was what they called a war baby. It was made during World War II, and it was made with the minimum amount of materials to save.
Wow.
Save material.
That is so they belong to your
Belonged to my father.
father. Yep.
I gave him to me. Here is his badge. You can tell how tarnished it is. He carried with him all the time.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, if anybody could like to look.
It says Bloomfield Fire Department Historian Grant Miller.
Wow.
Custom made
I love it.
for him.
These are fantastic.
Yep. And this was his badge as the honorary deputy chief of the Newark Fire Department. I brought a picture of that 53 LaFrance.
Great. Are you going to be able to show that too? Because I know there's some displays here of photographs I'm sure the Historical Society would love you to take a look at. Okay.
Here's the LaFrance.
Wow. Look at that.
It was 53. He bought it at public auction. And this was his speaking trumpet, which was when he was the International Fire Buff of the year 1984.
Wow.
Now here this.
Thank you so much for bringing that. That's fantastic. Well, I think that's it. If anybody wants to look at some of the photographs here, thank you all for coming and listening.
Thank you.
And then it goes up on top.